right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our session today. I've been actually really looking forward to this session in particular. Because, well, it's the last of five. So I'm done with this work, but we'll move on to the next thing. But more importantly, I'm really excited to talk to Mike Nichols about this topic. So, Mike, do you want to join me now?
Hi, nice to
Hi,
see you.
Mike. How are you, buddy? I haven't
Good.
seen you in a whole 10 minutes.
I've missed you.
Exactly. So y'all, Mike is a member of our field team who goes out and talks to lots of customers about just their use of Temporal. In particular, he does have a lot of expertise about migrating self-hosted instances to Temporal. Has lots of opinions on that. But I think more importantly, Mike, you were a user of Temporal before joining the company, right?
That's right. I led teams self-hosting. Temporal loved it, loved what it did to the teams. Didn't love becoming an expert in the things that didn't directly apply to shipping features, though. So I was actually talking about bringing a team over to cloud in the early days when the SaaS offering came up, and that's how I got linked up with Temporal and decided to kind of jump over and start helping others adopt
Right.
Temporal. Mhm.
And Mike, were you on the development side or more on kind of like the operational side of just running Temporal?
I was leading application teams, so we were shipping user-facing features I was a tech lead, principal, and architect, and so I was down coding, I was making decisions, I was having to work across teams internally to, if we're going to bring in some kind of new technology, you might get into negotiations with infra teams, whether it's worth it and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So, but the feature delivery was my primary concern.
That's great. Y'all, I just go through that really quickly because Mike does have more expertise about not just kind of coding within Temporal, but really the operational side of it than many people on the planet. I don't know. I think maybe Tiho is probably up there. Max, Mike, you're right up there. So
That's a crowd.
it is a crowd, and anybody who knows our Slack channel will know who Max and Tiho are for sure. But I think Mike, you're right up there with them. So thanks for doing this today.
Sure.
Last of a series that we're running. We went through a lot of reasons why people would kind of choose Temporal Cloud, why it's a little bit different, some of the things. But Mike, when somebody asks you, why do I want to migrate? Why would I even go through everything that you're about to talk to me about? Like, what's your initial response?
Um, my heart is I consider myself a sleep therapist. So I want application engineers to get out of jail and be able to ship their features and focus on business logic, the things that they're actually being really kind of measured by at work, and not get kind of death by a thousand cuts where
Right.
you're having to maintain all of this infrastructure and complexity that comes along with maintaining this kind of service. And so, I mean, sincerely, I just it's developers is one of our values here, and that I can't be more sincere about trying to help people come over and just kind of be able to let us maintain the SaaS offering. It's cheaper, it's faster, it's better, and let you focus on the stuff that's fun, which is building features that get plopped in front of your users.
Right. And Mike, I mean, in general, it is basically the same. I mean, if you were to self-host the temporal service, right, like you're going to set up persistence, we're going to go through all the things, right? Like it's the same thing anyway in the end, right? I mean, it's just basically what we've done a couple of things that are different to do it better, or like, how do you talk through that?
It's a lot more than that. Sometimes it's talked about as if it's just open source in the cloud, but the RBAC controls that we have, the one of the things that you start to think about is how do we manage team access to to the namespaces that are in Temporal. Also, the fact of environments, being having to maintain several instances of Temporal to kind of isolate these environments. It's non-trivial
Right.
non-trivial work to get into that. So yeah, there's a lot more to cloud. The performance aspect, our persistence layer is, you're not going to be able to compare it to that. Maybe you don't need that kind of scale. And a lot of times you don't, but just the convenience of being able to go out to the cloud UI and be able to interact with your namespaces, control your users, and it's just getting better. So
Yeah. Well, I'll have a little bit more difficult question to you. Those are all softballs, Mike.
sure.
Often, so I've been in conversations with you and others where, there's a platform team who wants control over things, and like, as a developer, it makes sense. Like, you want me to go spinning up Cassandra or MySQL and doing all this kind of like chaos? Absolutely not. Like, that's the one thing that I don't like to do. In fact, I refuse to do any of those things. That's easy. How do you talk to platform teams about this? Because they do want control over lots of different things sometimes, right? And so where do you go in that conversation? So
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean,
I
there's a
told you
lot
it's
of
not all
layers.
softballs, Mike.
No, there's a lot of layers to that. So it's true that there can be kind of this almost political struggle that can start to take place. At the end of the day, we're trying to make our own businesses succeed, and that means shipping things. I've been involved with startups that got bogged down in platform love and stopped shipping features, and that's kind of a death knell for an org. And so, but typically, I mean, infra teams are going to require negotiation with, just like you would, be filing support tickets, I suppose, with Temporal Cloud in the same way, except we have the experts actually maintaining this already. We're not going to have to be figuring out whether the infra team loves Helm charts or not, and all
Right.
these other kinds of decisions that an application engineer, frankly, doesn't have time to be dealing with. The engineering manager is, negotiating with the product manager, and they're trying to figure out how to move faster to meet some kind of goals. It's about business goals at the end of the day. And, I believe that for application engineers to get into the deep waters of whether, someone loves to just operate courts at scale is really the right approach for the organization, or whether they can just offload all of that kind of work to the experts. And, Temporal is peculiar too. I mean, just because of the manner in which we do replication, it's not just a database down below there, right? There's this
Right.
application level replication that's going on. It's a complex problem. And that's how we achieve this wonderful programming model and durability that you've come to expect. But that takes some, expertise, and it's going to require its own kind of team around that, in addition to maintaining those workers that are your application. And that's really where they should be focusing their attention is how to deal with their own applications.
That's right, Mike. And I think that's where we end up in a lot of these conversations is like you want to actually just make sure the applications are running. That is ultimately what they're measured on as well. Probably availability, reliability, all those things, RPO, RTO. That's what I think of when I think of like DevOps. And so I guess to each his own, whatever floats your boat. If you love doing Helm scripts and writing YAML, I don't, but hey, I think everybody does different things, and I think every organization is different, quite honestly, Mike. But I mean,
Yes, absolutely.
often we just see a lot of people coming to Temporal Cloud. Ultimately, in the end, I think we've seen some of the largest organizations on the planet with like huge, massive like operations departments say, why? Right? I mean, I think we see that a fair amount too. So
Sure.
I think
Sure.
it's you know I think as people get more and more close to it, you start to see lots of different reasons. I mean, but I think the important here thing, Mike, that like, what you spoke about is it's more than just like, oh, it's just the server moving over. I think sometimes a lot of, I don't know, I've been in software a long time. People talk about managed service and they're like, oh, we just take out the operational stuff. We'll do upgrades for you. It's more than that. We I think we endeavor to do a lot more
That
than.
that alone is worth it, though.
Oh, totally. Yeah, yeah,
It
exactly.
really is.
Don't get me wrong,
It's a
right? Like,
huge deal. Yeah.
yeah. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that, operationally what you have to do when you think about migrations and some of the things that you're going to be taking on over the course of the next couple of minutes. So I don't know, Mike, so let's just say, you convince your platform team or you're a developer and you actually want to say, I want to, sunset my self-hosted instance here and I want to actually move to Temporal Cloud. What do I got to prepare? Where do I start if I was going to do this journey?
Right. So I've got a deck that I'd like to
Right.
share out that can kind of enumerate some of these things.
You're
So
just busy after my heart here, Mike. You're the first one with like a full deck going on in this whole series. I like it.
I work for you, Jim.
We all work for Max, Mike.
Okay, let me I don't know,
Yeah, I
can you
got you.
see the slide presentation? Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Whoops.
yeah, that's
Okay.
great.
Start it here. Let's start at the beginning though. Okay.
And
Yeah,
just
so
real quickly before you get started, just hey,
yep.
anybody, if you have questions along the way, again, just throw them into QA, throw them into chat. I'm monitoring. Mike's presenting, so I'll know what's going on in the background, Mike. So thank you.
Yeah, I'd love this to be a conversation, and answer anything that comes up as best as I can. If I
Yeah.
don't, then I'll follow up and address them later. Yeah, so I was thinking about how best to kind of go through this. This is a pretty deep topic, and I don't mean that to be scary, but temporal is peculiar in the sense that it introduces the problem of time. It's not just when what you're executing or how durable that thing is. It's also when it's executing. And as soon as you bring time into the mix, you kind of scratch your head on how do I lift this thing from one environment and put it over into another environment without introducing risk and things like drops, drop signals and so on. So I thought I'd just kind of enumerate technically some tasks that might be in front of you or that will be in front of you when you decide to move from self-hosted to the cloud. So the first one is introducing a temporal client that is connecting to temporal cloud. That's kind of a duh, but I just wanted to clarify that um, that's a very simple thing to do. You're pointing to a different endpoint, a separate gRPC endpoint. You're going to be configuring probably the MTLS configuration inside of your SDK, or using some of our API key feature that's coming up, and or a combination of both. There's different options on how you secure that connection. That's not part of this discussion. But the point is that it's going to be the same experience as connecting to your self-hosted cluster. You're likely going to be running those in parallel or together inside the same process, though. Okay, so it's not just a wholesale replacement right out of the gate right now. So secondly, you're going to be starting to think about how you're encrypting and decrypting this data if you're coming to the cloud. In most cases, folks would want to reach for a data converter, which encrypts the data on the wire. It's a kind of a form of middleware. If you're not familiar with that, a lot of self-hosters are not using data converter, but that is something that you'll want to be thinking about is, how do I introduce that? Again, that's really just kind of a plug-in that you put onto the client itself. It's a simple interface to put in there, and we have a lot of samples about how to implement that. Third, you got to choose the lifetime strategy for your workflow. So this is what I was alluding to earlier with temporal, kind of having the problem of time. So
Yeah.
oftentimes a business is dealing with some kind of compelling event like, hey, my Cassandra cluster is going to get torn down at the end of March, or so there's some kind of forcing function that's going on inside the organization. Oh, maybe there's a move in the team that would even be maintaining the cluster. Maybe the person who is maintaining the current temporal instance left, right? It's scary. So you have to start thinking about what is my timeline for a workflow to complete, have a terminal event, you complete, cancel, however you want to deal with this. So the point is that leads you into the ability to either drain off existing workflows and not even migrate them. Maybe you can just take that approach, no problem, and just start routing traffic over there. I'll talk more about that shortly.
So
But you
Mike,
also,
you'll talk about
yeah,
long-running workflows and what
yes,
to do with those. Okay,
yep,
great. Awesome. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
key
that's
thing.
that's the big head scratcher with all of this, and I'll be tackling that one primarily. The other choice is dealing with the long running thing, though, and so I'll get more into details on that. That's where you would possibly get into refactoring your workflow code. It can be pretty small changes, but they do need to likely expose and accept the current state of your executions to resume in another namespace. So I want to be clear that what I'm going to be talking about today is at the application level. This is not at the history level. This isn't like a mass data export that's going on from your database into Temporal Cloud when I'm proposing some of these tactics. Okay, there's flaws. There's some work that's involved in this. I'll be transparent about that. It's going to take some effort, but it's worth it. Finally, or next, you do need to update the code that's calling and interacting with these workflows to route to the cloud namespace. So if you have like an API layer or something like that that's actually starting the workflows, signaling the workflows, querying the workflows to perform user experiences, then you'll need to compose the temporal client likely inside of that process in order to route traffic over to the new namespace. There are some techniques that I have on how to detect whether to perform that routing or not. I've seen some people want to maybe introduce their own catalog of workflows and know whether they should route over to the new namespace. Uh, you could take that approach and it'll probably be okay because it's a short amount of time, hopefully. But you got to be careful with that, just because you're kind of rebuilding temporally. Well, what if that service is down? What do you do, right? So something to think about. Also, how do I verify that this has been a successful migration? Is there some kind of visibility query that I can run in order to kind of do some spot checking on the data that was shipped over? And then finally, I need to work on the deployment. So I'm introducing a new worker that's obviously connecting to the new namespace. Can these run in the same processes right now safely, or do I need to have a completely separate deployment, that's kind of running in parallel? How do I want to do that? This is going to require a little bit of planning and probably interacting with your infra team to deal with that too.
So, Mike, this is a really good list, and it's kind of comprehensive. We're going to go through some of these things a little bit more. I mean, really, kind of at the end, in the end, are you kind of got to just kind of choose what's right for your workload? Is that correct? Like, if it's payments, yeah, you got to be looking at all these things like crazy extensively, right? But if it's like, I don't know, some silly little like data movement at 3 in the morning, I don't know. Like, you kind of got to consider what you're migrating, right?
Yeah, that's the heart of this is so there's risk, right?
Right.
And so that's what I'm trying to minimize, but at the same time, I have another risk potentially, that compelling event that I was talking about earlier that might be driving me towards this. So how do I de-risk this whole thing? And that there's a library that I built that's an interceptor that we could talk about later, but that can actually help with this whole migration to do that de-risks, for example, dropping signals. What if you're having a lot of throughput that you're sending down to these workflow executions? You don't want to lose these signals.
Yeah.
How do I do that safely? How do I even feed back up to callers that, hey, this workflow has actually been sent over to another namespace? There are quite a few things that you need to be thinking about the workflow itself, the duration of time that it might be open.
Right.
Um, and so, yeah, you have to understand obviously what's going on inside the workload. And you have to be always considering, when I started this workflow, how much time has passed, and how do I deal with that? So,
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. It's just the shape of the workflow and the risk associated with it, I think, are the key things. It's like, yeah, all these things, you don't have to do all these things. It just really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. And we help people go through all those things. But we'll talk about that at the end. Thanks, Mike.
yeah. Yeah, and so there's some considerations that I thought I could just kind of walk through quickly to that help you on this kind of decision path, right? And the very first one is what you're talking about, which is understanding your workload and then determining, whether these workloads can be drainable. And what I mean by drainable is just let the workflows stop receiving execution starts in your old environment, and at the caller level, you start routing traffic over to the cloud namespace. That's the simplest form of migration, which is just start sending traffic to the new service and let the old ones wind down. So that's kind of the big fork in the road here with dad jokes. And so, am I willing to do that? I get into discussions on short-lived versus long-lived workflows. That's not exactly it's hard to quantify that. What does that even mean? Is it weeks? Is it days? What it really means is what's your compelling event? What is the motivator? How long are you willing to live with the old environment, based on cost or maybe some kind of personnel change before you must move things off to the cloud, considering always that if you're kicking off new workflows, those themselves are going to have some kind of duration. So you have to kind of give yourself a padding, out in front of the cutoff time. So how long do I want to live with the old art? Also, can I update the starter code to route the new workflows to the cloud namespace? There's a lot of teams that you have, like the back end team working with the front end team who owns the back end front facing layer, maybe. And so there's some negotiation that's going on with deployments of the new temporal client and that logic that's going to start routing over to the new cloud. But this is really kind of the break point here is, can I drain off my things? If I can't, then I enter into a longer discussion, which is about I'll just call them long running workflows right now. Um, and that's, the question is, are my workflows in a relationship? Um, I need to understand, is there a parent-child relationship that I'm relying on? And this is subtle. This isn't necessarily just the parent, close policy that is not migratable, but it's also, am I signaling or querying other workflows inside of my environment? If so, can I refactor, maybe move those things, those calls into an activity to keep performing this important logic? Those are the discussions that I need to have. I need to understand how workflows are relating to each other. This can be kind of a tangled web, depending on how you've architected your workloads. So then you move on into, can I even refactor my code? Am I allowed to go in and spend some time, and it's, with tests and so on, to verify that I can receive the state that I need in order to resume an execution into a new namespace. This is what I meant by application level migration. You realize I'm not talking about lifting the history up and then moving it somewhere else here. I'm actually talking about making code changes and using a facility that we have that can actually help with how you trigger this kind of migration to move that state over, for you using interceptors. Um, as part of that decision process, though, what do I need to skip? Do I need to redo those activities? Probably not. Maybe you actually can't because your activities aren't idempotent, which is something you need to fix anyways. But maybe I need to skip some actions. Maybe the timer that's inside of the workflow, assuming you only have one, I need to actually figure out how much time has passed since this thing got started last time. So there's some maths that I'm doing, and I'm having to, pretend that I'm resuming this into another namespace potentially. Finally, what about heartbeat details in long-running activities? How am I going to deal with that? Is it important? Do I need to concern myself with that? I need to have some kind of strategy for dealing with that resuming as well. So next, I get into the starter. So a starter in this context is, anything that's starting, signaling, or querying my workflow, interacting with it. Can I refactor that code? Can I use two temporal SDK clients? I've come across customers that didn't want to have two connections open to two different services for some reason. There are peculiarities in teams. And also you have to take care that your workflow IDs are not going to be ensured, uniqueness across the two namespaces. So it's not a big deal, probably. You can check for that maybe before you re-execute or signal or something, but it's something you want to think about. The developer experience, let's say that I can drain some of my workflows off, but I have these two that are kind of annoying and I actually want to move them over. Right. For a time, I might actually be dealing with going into a couple of different UIs to relate to the workloads. That can be a big deal, like not a big deal, but it can be something you need to think about, like an incident or something. If you're having to debug a workload, is it over here? Is it over there?
Right.
Where are my goodies? The data converter also, am I going to want to get into a codec server that it can actually convert that data in the UI so that I can see the real data? These are kind of the questions that you need to be thinking through. And then the final one here, Jim, is the worker deployments do require some planning. I need to support both namespaces. That's clear. And also, whenever it comes time to do this migration, are my resources in such a way that I can actually wake up all of these dormant workloads to actually do the migration and send their data to the other namespace? Because that's what we're proposing here whenever we talk about doing this application level migration. I'll pause there.
No, that's great, Mike. So there's a fair amount of stuff to think through. Obviously, it's and like we were talking about, every workload has a different shape. That initial kind of consideration of what's important, what's not, I think is like, I don't know, Mike, on average, how long does this kind of evaluation take? I mean, you just went through a lot of stuff here. Seems daunting, but it's basically, how long do you spend kind of analyzing, like, okay, what's our plan to migrate? Typically, I don't know, on average, I guess.
I think it depends on if you're again on that compelling event. And also, obviously, how long have you been using Temporal? Probably if you're considering this, then you're already kind of a power user of Temporal. You understand the things I've been talking through already. And so this is like a day of sitting through and kind of understanding the workloads. Obviously, it depends on how many workloads you have and how many teams, right? But that's where you would actually break up that work across there, and
Right.
you'd have to. But the idea is just like any kind of project. You figure out the risk and you figure out the reward. And then you measure that, and you take the complex parts probably first and plan around that. And then in most cases, though, we found that people can just drain off their workloads
That's
and
right.
start to route over to the cloud. That's really typically true. I mean, even if you have your workers running for a month or two in the old art, you have glory waiting for you over in the cloud just by
Right.
routing over there. So,
It's really the reason I asked Mike was that kind of last sentence. I mean, in most cases, it is you're just kind of draining and moving, right? Like,
yep.
I don't know, 4 out of 5. I don't want to say 9 out of 10. That's a big one, but in 4 out of 5, it's probably typically relatively straightforward, right? I mean, that more or less.
Yeah, it is. I don't want to make up stats, and
I
because I
know
haven't really,
that's
I
my
haven't really
job.
done that. Right.
I do that.
I want to be careful. It is a thought process, but we're here to help you with that too, though. I mean, I love talking to people walking through this. I can help you, with a run book or something like that to be able to plan these things out. But we haven't really come up across a situation yet where we haven't been able to kind of put our heads together and think about the least risky way of doing this, and even the longer running workflows to be able to get over to the cloud and shut down all that old expensive infrastructure.
Oh, that's the other part too, right? There's the
Yes,
like sunsetting of everything too. So,
exactly.
I mean, we've been through this with probably hundreds of namespaces, maybe thousands of
Thousands,
namespaces at this point, right now. So,
thousands. Yep.
who is doing this work? I mean, basically, our team sits down with you and basically does this, right? Is that correct, Mike? It's just part of being a cloud. Like, there's no extra fee. We just do this, right?
Yeah, I mean on the cloud, when you have an account with us, that's part of us helping. We want we want your workload. We're a consumption-based service, so we're only going to get paid if you use us. And so we're very motivated to work with you to build components. I've built stuff in order to support customers for this. Drop in reusable types of components. So I mean, we're all in on trying to get this over, but it's not just a motivation by the money. It's truly sincere on, look, I've been there not shipping features. Instead, I'm fighting learning, why a Kubernetes deployment is not working. And I'm having to learn all these DevOps concerns instead of doing the gig that I'm actually getting paid to do, which is, land features in front of customers. So,
Yeah, I mean, Mike, it's not, I think you and there's several people here that actually really get this, but like the reason I work at Temporal is like our valuation is directly tied to the value our customers get from our software. Period.
yep.
Period. Like it's like if this isn't working for y'all, like we don't work as a company, which I think is kind of one of those things. I find it to be rather unique in my, whatever, couple dozen years or I don't know, however long I've been doing this, but I think it's one of the reasons I work here. Mike, it seems like some of this stuff, I don't know, could be automated. Maybe we could build some tools that would make this easier. It seems like a
Mhm.
lot here. Where are we headed with this stuff? Is that where we're going? Oh, look at
Yeah. So,
your graphics. Say life
so
in marketing, Mike Nichols.
Yeah, it's from 1936, right? Yeah, I did have a start talking with engineering about a way of being able to do this more as a data type of migration. It's early days, and I don't want to overreach on, like when we're talking about maybe, the end of this year.
Mike, there's no product managers listening, so go
Right. Yeah.
for it.
So I got to be careful, but I've actually been on that other side. I don't like to be
I know.
overprompt. So, uh, anyhow, that's the question everybody should be asking is why don't I just lift my execution history and send it somewhere else? The answer is we already do that on the SaaS offering to give you some even under load in order to give you the reliability that you rely on for cloud. We have tools for doing this. The question is, how do we join those pipes across customer environments to ours? So there's quite a few complex decisions that need to be made. How far do we go with that? It's early days on that. We've just started talking about that. Well, it's been talked about at length, in engineering, but now we're starting to figure out how we can productize this
Yeah.
approach. And I branded the project the Get Out of Jail Free project because that's what it feels like. Is hey, just get me out of here, and I don't want to have to
Right.
do all this thinking. So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
it's funny, Mike. I come from the database world, and I always joked like any vendor who told you a migration to their solution was easy, it should not be trusted.
right.
Honestly, and it's just this the practical reality is like we're gonna go through all the things with you. if
Mhm.
we're happy to sit down and go through all and have the conversation about all the things, right? And I think that's where, again, like our success is completely contingent on your success. And I think that that really kind of makes us do kind of the right things in the context of this over and over again. I've seen it, right?
It's a matter of integrity. Transparency is to me, and
Right on,
so
Sam.
whenever I want to sit down and work with somebody on a problem, if I can't figure it out, then I'll tell you. So
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think throughout this entire series of these webinars and anybody who has been through all of them, I hope you saw basically what Mike just talked about. And I think we're just going to be authentic and genuine in the things that we communicate to our audience, and let's show you all the things, right? Like there's huge value in moving to temporal cloud. We know that. We wouldn't have it otherwise, and that's why we are committed to open source. I mean, you could do all this. You can do all this, right? Like for us, it's like, how do we actually have a value add in what you're trying to do? And I think that's kind of, hopefully that's been what I think people have heard throughout this entire webinar series. It's really the theme we tried to promote here. But there were no questions, Mike. I think your stuff was so good or like so complex that, like who knows, right? Like, wait a second, is this on? Right. So but Mike, thanks for pulling that stuff together. I'm sure like it's hugely valuable to people.
sure.
They start thinking about these things. Um, anything else that you wanted to just add? I mean, we're at the end of this series of the cloud stuff. Like, just right, I think you looked through a couple of them, right? So
Yeah.
anything other last things, Mike?
Yeah. I mean, all of this stuff, there's a lot of moving pieces, and I'm here because I saw the value of the cloud offering, and so um, I think that it's something that you really need to strongly consider on how it's impacting you, maybe in ways you don't even recognize. I know that I've led teams where we didn't realize we were experiencing all this tremendous latency, and it was actually impacting user experience, but we were so busy with the DevOps side of maintaining this thing that actually was speeding our feature development, but at the same time, we weren't maintaining it well.
Yeah.
And that took a whole level of effort that was frankly intimidating. That wasn't my wheelhouse. So we'd love to take that over for you.
Same, dude. I like to code, but last thing I want to do is run workers in a server. I'm sorry, but like last thing I want to do. So listen, Mike, thank you so much for pulling everything together.
Yeah.
It was really great content. So thanks, buddy. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Good time.
But thank you everybody for joining. And like I said, anybody who went to all of these, a like a like five times thank you to all of you. But if you get to three, then three. But you know what I mean. So, but thanks everybody for joining us throughout this entire series. Like I said earlier, the series will be available, on our website, download, to view on YouTube, all the stuff. So, if you're missing out, or you want to see one of these, you can just go to our website and we'll or just call us or text us or I don't know, do people call anymore. Reach out to us and we'll help you find things if need be, whatever that is. So with that, again, thank you, Mike, for
Yeah.
everything. Thank you,
Thanks for
everybody,
leading it.
for joining.
Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
you bet, buddy.
Yeah.
And everybody have a great day.